Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to my van down by the river. I am showing you a picture of a giant tree. So I had to get this out of storage and show you this picture because I wanted to talk about giant trees today. And what better way than to show you an actual picture that hangs in my house when I'm actually living in a house and not in my van down by the river. So at any rate, yeah, check out that giant tree. This picture is from the turn of the century, the 19th to the 20th century in Oregon. This is part of the deforestation that took place in the Pacific Northwest. And here I am. All right, then. So, yeah, if you need to back up and look at that picture some more. There's some great photographs online as well of pictures. You know, I just hate doing video editing. But how many of you have been out to see the giant redwoods in California? That these big trees, there's something primordial and mysterious and almost alive about trees. They're, I'm trying to remember the producer's name, but he was Sir somebody. He produced the Beatles. He was a record producer that did the Beatles, and he was a knighted Sir. And his name escapes me. You know, I don't do a ton of research. I go a lot of times just off of memory. But, and it's getting sketchy in my old age. But the, yeah, this guy, this knight, he did a series on the origins of music. And one of the series was on rhythm. And I think I saw this on the BBC. And I used to own the set of these videos. But he tells the story, or actually the video shows, and this person tells his own story on this series about music and its origins. And his job was to be a wildlife and nature photographer. And he would often set up cameras that would record over long periods of time, video cameras. And a lot of times it also had audio with it. And he would have these audio video recording sessions set up in the wilderness to listen to the sounds of nature and analyze the calls of the birds and every other thing you can think of. And one time he left a camera and a microphone live for a couple of weeks on a tree, just on a tree. And I even forget which continent this was on, but I think it was in Europe or central, you know, that Eurasia area. But at any rate, they were in an old primordial forest, and this tree was ancient. And I don't know why they put the camera on there to begin with, but the big thing that they found out is that when they were fast forwarding the tape, there was this clear sound. And it was a sound that happened every once in a while throughout the day. And when you played the sound in fast forward, there was a specific rhythm, a recognizable syncopated rhythm. And that this tree was making this sound that was so slow. It was sounded like nothing. A creak here, a crack there. But when you sped it up, it was making a rhythm of life. And he thought, this is weird. This has got to be some kind of anomaly. So let's go over and we're going to do this on another tree in the same forest. So they did it on another tree in the same forest, recorded it for a period of time, sped up the tape. The sound coming from the tree was definable and clear. It was obviously a rhythm just like the other tree. The trees were making sounds. They were making rhythms. It was a language. The trees were alive. Well, surely this just must be an anomaly to this one forest, or just this one type of tree. So in the same forest, he gets another type of tree, a completely unrelated, different size kind of tree, records it, same rhythm. He's like, this can't be just this has to be just this forest. So he goes to another country, records another tree, same rhythm, goes to another continent. He travels the globe recording trees, and they all have the same rhythm of life. This guy that was doing the audio recording, the man that discovered all of this, that was showcased on the Sir Whatever's show about rhythm on the BBC, that this guy was a musician. And so he thought, this rhythm must be significant. So he went to a world beat drummer whose job was to learn all of the rhythms of the world. And he said, tell me what you know about this rhythm. And he said, this is what we call the universal rhythm. every indigenous native society, whether they be from the African continent, the Americas, regardless of where they're from, that at the core of their music, in one form or another, whether it be the rhythmic pattern of a mandolin player in a bluegrass band, or whether it be the rhythmic player of a conga player, or a African talking drum player, that all of these indigenous societies' rhythmic patterns, in one way or another, contain the universal rhythm. And I'm going to do my best to give you the universal rhythm right now. See if I can do it. And somebody's hot rodding. I don't know if you can hear that. Racing that engine. Okay. So here's my best take out. You ready? Every tree makes that sound. Isn't that awesome? So I just saved you 2 hours of documentary watching so that you could get to the root of that little nugget, that these trees are making a sound. And so I grew up in these Pacific Northwest rainforests, and I grew up underneath all of these ancient trees. And there's this idea that has been on the internet that I did a video on before that's got me all tripped out. And it's the concept of these big buttes. A butte is a uprising of rock with a flat top on there. And, you know, a mesa is a little bigger one. And I used to live down in Medford when I was a teenager, and a lot of people know that I kind of used to draw as a hobby when I was a kid, and I kind of gave it up for music. But I used to draw those mesas, I guess because they were there, those table rocks, what they called them. I mean, my school used to be on Table Rock Road down in Medford. And so, yeah, there used to be, I used to spend a lot of time drawing these, and I always thought that they looked like tree stumps. But now there's this real growing movement amongst people involved in kind of, part of it's the pre-flood history kind of curiosity, and the other one is like challenging the geological answer for how these mesas and table rocks were, how these buttes were formed. And what's interesting in many of them, and I forget what they call it, but they're made up of this stone, this extremely hard stone that is, when you looked at, if you looked at the top of the mesas, it would be made up of little octagonal pieces about like this. Little perfectly octagon, cellular looking shards of rock. When you look at it from the side, and you've probably seen this in Oregon. I know I've driven these Oregon roads and seen this kind of outcropping where it's coming up and they're just like all tied together and they're perfectly mated. And it just looks like they're, I don't know, it looks like strands of spaghetti or stuff come out of a Play-Doh squirter. You know, it's there, and they're all the same exact shape, each strand. And each strand of this rock is octagonal and exactly the same shape. And they all fit together into like a beehive kind of, and that's what the top of these mesas, if you can get rid of the dirt and get down to the stone. And when you examine the sides of these buttes and table rocks, they're made out of this stone that terminates in this perfect geometric pattern. And, you know, geologists want to tell us that that was formed from lava rising up. But yet, when we study lava flows that still happen today, we find no rock that mimics this in any way, shape, or form. So I think they're missing the fact that these things look like giant tree stumps. And those perfectly cellular pieces, have you ever stripped the bark off a tree and you pulled the strands out, and it's made out of these strands that grow up through the plant, these plant fibers? Well, if you could examine those under a microscope, they're octagonal shaped. They're shaped, they have these geometric patterns that all fit together just like a beehive. And that's what it looks like. And so all of those things really make you believe that these things could be giant trees. And when you do the study and the historical, ancient history, I don't know, mythological study, you come up with a theory based around what was called the Cedars of Lebanon. The Cedars of Lebanon are almost like a mythical tree that are so enormous that they go above the clouds, that when you climb up these giant trees, you're looking down on the clouds from above the earth, that they are so big. Well, give you an example. The island of Cyprus, which coincidentally is right off the coast of Lebanon, And Lebanon, where all these giant trees were said to have one day existed, the Lebanese flag is the giant cedar tree. And so a cypress tree is related to a cedar tree, and they typically grow in or near the water. So the island of Cyprus is one of these formations, like a table rock, with these basalt structures. I think it's basalt. These octagonal stone structures, which may very well be petrified plant fiber of enormous size. The entire island of Cyprus is one of these things. And then mythologically, they say that this cypress tree was cut off and created the island of Cyprus. And that was the tree of life. That at one time, the tree of life was the island of Cyprus. Interesting stuff. I've been researching this for a while. And there is some interesting folklore about that from around the globe. That there are indigenous tribes that claim that the buttes in the Southwest were trees that were sawn down. And then you've got the Paul Bunyan mythology of this giant with a big blue ox. Blue is interesting. Do some research on the significance of blue in the pre-flood, pre-diluvian world. You can see that in some of my videos on Unmasking the Dark Side. But anyway, you've got Paul Bunyan and his big blue ox, Babe, and, you know, he's sawing down, cutting down these giant trees with a giant axe and a giant saw. And then when you go back, you find in extra biblical sources like the Book of Enoch a description that pretty much says it straight out. The Nephilim cut down all the trees. That there were these enormous trees that were huge as islands. That these big mesas and buttes were at one point before the flood, trees that went clear up. And that the earth was so rich in oxygen from these trees, and there was so much food produced from the fruit of these trees of various sorts and types that grew up into the stratosphere, that there was no hunger problems anywhere on the earth. Food was available year-round from the fruit from these trees, and that maybe the Garden of Eden was the entire planet to some degree or another before something catastrophic happened. So if the Nephilim cut down the trees, and these flat tops are from a literal saw, why did the giants of old, these ancient Nephilim, these fallen angels from antiquity, why did they cut down all the trees? Why did the United States government kill all the buffalo? Why did Mao in China take control of all the farms? Why are the Africans in South Africa trying to violently take all the farmland away from the farmers? Because it's about controlling the food. The best way to control your enemy is to starve them. The Nephilim were involved in a war with each other, and they were cutting down the trees to destroy the food supply. And in doing so, they destroyed the environment as well. And that those trees, who knows how many thousands, millions of years those primordial trees have been growing, that they cut down to get to that size. Or were all trees that big? Did God just make them like that from the get-go? You know, you insert your own, ideology in there. But the idea that these things were once trees, and that the fallen angels cut them down for the purpose of starving the world because they were that evil. It reminds me of something that Bill Maher just said few weeks ago, that he would like to see a recession and the destruction of the American economy, so that because he thought that would get rid of Trump, that he was willing to throw the economy under the bus to get rid of Trump. And those Nephilim were willing to starve themselves and the rest of the world just to get the best of their enemies. Don't. So what do you think? Are these natural rock formations, or were they once trees, and did the Nephilim cut them down as an act of war? Did that destroy our Garden of Eden to a great degree? Is that why people used to live to be 1,000 years, and now you're lucky to get to 70? 100 nowadays. Oh, tip of the hat. My grandma just turned 103. Granny's 103 now. Wow. Anyway, tell me what you think in the comment section.